And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Liz Nickles. Liz is fascinating, actually. She's a specialist in branding, marketing, and strategic vision with deep expertise in global branding and change management in complex and highly matrixed organizations. She's been awarded top marketing industry honors, including an Effie, an Addy, a Clio, Advertising Woman of the Year. She's the author of 11 books. That's 11, including Brainstorm, which was from Paul Grave Macmillan. Serves as an advisor to many people. She speaks, and she is a well seasoned and world renowned thought leader that I'm glad is joining us today. So, welcome, Liz.
Hi, Peter. Welcome to you.
Thanks. So, you've got lots of activities spinning at any given time, like most smart and busy people do. Paint us a picture of how the content and the thought leadership and the books and the speaking sort of play into all that, and how they serve you, and how it's connected.
Well, I would say that the kind of leitmotif of that and the work that I do is branding. And branding has kind of had a blossoming proliferation in the past 5 years in particular, the past decade really picking up speed. And now everybody's a brand, every college kid's a brand. And it's, as we've seen, not always to the best, but it's really become democratized, and in that it's actually lost value, and it's very important to keep that in mind. That's one of the big trends that I follow. Also, also another thread is women and thought leadership among women. That's something I've been tracking for 30 years with qualitative and quantitative testing in my Update Women project, which I share with my research partner, Lori Ashcraft. So we have been tracking that, and those two trends now have really come together. There's an intersection there on those trends, and you start to see the women's initiatives branding themselves as such as hashtag Me Too, which has obviously really taken light. And that's the kind of thing that we see changing thoughts across the world. And you see young girls like the little girl Greta, I can't remember her last name,
Yep.
who is Times Person of the Year, and you see that whole issue of branding has trickled down to children.
So let me ask you this. I mean, you said earlier that sort of everyone's a brand now, right? Every college kid,
Every
everywhere,
dog.
every dog, right? Every dog on Instagram, right? Poodles on Instagram or whatever. I have been doing some thinking, a little bit of writing around sort of the evolution, and what I mean by that is, when Tom Peters, for example, came out with sort of the whole personal branding revolution. Jesus, 25 years now. That was sort of the first mass attack at that. And some of that was hokey. Some of that was, well, you can have a personal brand by being the guy that wears purple socks or the gal that always wears a green bow tie or something, whatever, right? And I actually think that thought leadership is the natural evolution, the next step in personal branding, because you can be smarter than anyone out there, and you can outsmart those that you can't outspend. So I'd love your thoughts or reactions on that.
Well, this is interesting, Peter, because the fact is that branding isn't about purple socks. That might be your logo,
Right.
okay? That might be, physical attribution of something that you've taken over. But branding is an emotional institution. That's what really connects people to the product, the service, the thought, whatever it may be. Thought leadership is also about emotion.
Right. So where I guess where I was going is, and I was using sort of the purple socks being hokey, is thought leadership by its very definition has more depth, has more gravitas, is harder to accomplish than saying, I'm just gonna go buy 50 pairs of purple socks and everybody knows when Peter's in the room,
Oh,
whatever. So that's where I was going. Sort of the bar's been raised because any dope can buy a pair of socks using that analogy. But to really dive into the world of thought leadership takes a commitment and is a bit risky in terms of, if what you put out there isn't quite thoughtful, it could backfire terribly.
well, that's definitely true, and in fact, sometimes, I mean, a good example of that is probably Donald Trump. Um, who had brilliant branding, which, in my opinion, won him the election. And now that's really backfired. So if the emotional connection is one that kind of hits the wrong keys, then it's completely destructive. Trump is what I call a brandzilla,
Yep.
and these brandzillas that have popped up, taken over from the purple socks world. And hashtag Me Too is also a brandzilla, and so is Hermes, and so is Coca Cola.
Let's bring it down to the thought leaders. So the folks listening today are authors, speakers, thought leaders, consultants, academics. And for many of them, they come from a place where the work should stand for its own. Like, so let's take an academic, for example. They're
Okay.
smart, they've done their homework, they're probably not well versed in branding, but the smarts and the depth of the research in and of itself may not be enough to get the attention it needs in a crowded, noisy, super busy, information flooded universe. So let's talk about sort of the right use of branding for thought leaders.
Okay, well, two good examples of that might be Nicholas Negroponte and Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah, let's good, excellent. Okay.
So there you have two people who've done their research and come to some interesting conclusions. In the case of, I think they kind of do it in an inverse way
Yep.
to each other, which all of us who are interested in our own branding can look at, because Malcolm Gladwell brings it down to the simplistic and something everybody can notice. The Beatles practiced in Germany 80 billion times, and Bill Gates started as a kid, getting time on computers, and then you can see that you can bring that down to things like that everyone can understand, and how you can apply that. Okay, if I really practice, maybe I can.
But let's push on Gladwell further. So, for example, I remember 15 years ago when I first saw him speak, and I was a huge fan. I think the first book was Tipping Point,
Yeah.
and I was a huge. I read that. I'm like, wow, that's really interesting, right? And then I had an opportunity to go see him speak shortly thereafter, and quite frankly, he was awful. He was terrible, and I walked away terribly disappointed. And I got to thinking, and I'm like, of course he would be awful. Let's take a look at who this guy is, right? He's an introvert. He's wicked smart. He's a little bit shy. He's a little bit I don't mean this to sound terrible, but just sort of odd and quirky looking, right? He's short, he's got this weird hair, he's just different, and he wasn't a guy that sort of grew up on the stage. And then what happened is I had an opportunity to see him again about 2 years later, and he blew it away. And he's probably the Malcolm Gladwell that most of us see today when we
Uh-huh.
when we listen to his podcast or see him speak, etc. So I think there comes a time where it needs to shift. So I would say part of his brand is obviously the approachable, the quirky, the interesting, but some of his I say physical slash personal slash quirkiness, he's weaved into who he is, right? Right. He's this sort of elfin like brilliant little creature.
Well, so did Stephen Hawking. I mean, he couldn't speak at all,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
but he
No, right,
became,
right, right. Yeah.
yeah, and he was a brilliant speaker maybe before he had his unfortunate, afflictions.
Illness. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he made that into something. I mean, you can see people who do that. Chuck Close in painting,
Yes. Yep.
there are people who can take their handicaps, and I mean those are massive handicaps,
Sure.
very unfortunate. But those of us who are fortunate enough just to be shy or something, we can work on that, and bring our
Sure.
thoughts. Our thought leadership is about bringing your thoughts and your innovation out to people to share it.
I agree with that, but what I'm trying to push on is so if I'm a thought leader today and my domain area is whatever leadership, management, resilience, it almost doesn't matter what it is, right? So number one, I've got my own definition of thought leadership, but you can't just be regurgitating other people's things. You've got to have something unique to add to the conversation. You've got to be elevating the discussion of the discipline to the next level, etc. And some of that, the level of insight or smarts or brilliance is clearly baked into the brand. But then you have to wrap some other things around the brand. And that's where I think people struggle. So when you look at, let's say, take a Simon Sinek, for example, who's built a wonderful brand. He's direct, he's got the accent. He's a little bit counterintuitive. And then you look at some others that are out there. Their brand might be, like let's take a Gary Vee as an example. He's very approachable to the younger generation. He's got the hoodie. He's dropping the F bomb. Those are all elements of the brand. So I get, my question for you is, as people start to break out of their shell as a thought leader, what are the things they can do to sort of develop a brand that is authentic yet different, that's real to them, yet will help them stand out? Because the problem is the market's crowded.
Well, the market is like a subway station at rush hour at Grand Central Station.
Yeah, right.
So that's what I mean about brand proliferation. Now that you have a brand, you have to brand the brand. You know,
Exactly.
so or you could go the other way, and the opposite. I think it's polar opposites, and I think that what you have to do then is become like a non-brand. Very interesting. If you took here's a example that anyone can look at today who's listening,
Yep.
and I just go out and get the January Vogue magazine. I happen to pick it up. It could be anything, it could be anything. But I saw a great example in there, so I thought I'd
Sure.
bring it. There's a whole page. Of course, there's all these. There's a few ads, a number of them from double page spread, Ralph Lauren,
Yep.
the gigantic brands, and
Yep.
some features. And then a whole page is on. I call it a grandma brand, a new launch of a hair care brand, bringing it's a global thing, bringing traditional Indian beauty into the mainstream. Launched by a no-name person, and she's using her grandmother's ideas. And there's even in the packaging, a little story from her grandmother. I mean, that's like anti-branding in the max, and they do a full page on this with
But it
pictures
got
and
your
information.
attention, right? So because
Yeah,
so
it
so
did.
because it's
It,
a
it's
little, yeah, yeah.
it stood out among Louis Vuitton, and on the cover is Cardi B, of course. So here you have Cardi B, on one full page, and then you have Grandma brand.
Okay, I
So
think this is the first time we've had a mention of Cardi B on the podcast on thought leadership, which I
well,
don't know.
she
I think
obviously she had it in spades, or somebody around her did,
yeah,
because
exactly, exactly.
this is a woman who went from like the stripper pole to the cover of Vogue in like lightning speed.
Right,
So
right.
and is considered a thought leader. She's
Well, yeah, by some. Let's leave it at
well,
that. But not by all. So maybe in
well,
the same folks that we consider
Vogue,
Kim
Vogue treats her
Kardashian a
with
thought
great
leader. So yeah,
Vogue treats her with great honor, with great honor and respect, and she has her point of view, and it's representative of
yeah, I'll give you
where
that.
a segment of the market is headed, and probably where younger segment of the market finds aspirational in
Yep,
some way.
yep,
So you can't discount it. I think one of the things is you can't be a brand snob. If you want to stand out today, you got to kind of you do your own gap analysis,
yep,
okay?
yep,
Um, a need gap analysis or whatever you want to call it.
yep,
Map it out. Take the time and make your own map of who is in your space and what they're saying. What's their message? What is their thinking? And then see where you are, and see if you're overlapping 10 other people. You better think you're going to have a really hard time to stand
yep.
out.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts. Good stuff. So I want to shift for a moment, if we could, Liz, to publishing, right? So not that many people have written book. Well, I shouldn't say that. Lots of people have written a book or and lots more have attempted to write a book, and lots more than that have potentially even thought about maybe one day writing a book. Very few have written 11. So given that you've got a little bit of experience in the publishing world, and you've been with St. Martin's, you've been with Palgrave Macmillan. I mean, you've been with some of the big houses. Give us a sense of how to have a successful collaboration with a publisher. What's different today than it was, maybe 15 years ago or 20 years ago in the publishing world? Just, the world according to you as it relates to publishing a book.
Well, now is a great time to publish a book because anybody can publish a book. If you really want to publish a book, all you have to do is write the book
Yep.
and look online for a way to get it published, and you're published. Now, that doesn't mean people will read the book, or that you can get internet distribution. You can be on Amazon and have the partnership with them for your book instantly.
Yep.
You can apply for an ISBN number, and you're in the global world of publishing.
Right, but on that end, the barrier to entry has gotten to close to zero.
Right.
But the inverse of that is, well, if everybody can, everybody does. Now it's about obviously the marketing, the distribution, the branding, the all that stuff. Because
Right.
quite frankly, as a proliferation of everybody becoming an author, there's there's quite frankly a lot of garbage out there that's just not worth the investment of a reader's time.
Well, I think are you talking about how somebody's going to get published?
Well, I'm just talking about what you've seen in the publishing world and how you've reacted to it, and what what would you
Okay.
advise folks to do differently today? What would just sort of a 101 on the publishing world based on your experience.
Well, it used to be, it used to, first of all, just well, correction, I've written 15 books that have
Oh,
been
I'm
published.
sorry.
A few more since probably the bio that you came upon. But yeah, I've written a lot of books. But the main difference is when I started first publishing books, it was about writing the book. Okay, you had the concept, you wrote the book, and then people would look at the book and see if they wanted to publish it. And then after that, if it came out, was it going to get you on the Today Show or any way that was going to, raise the profile in order to really make them stock it in stores and that kind of thing. But the first step was the book.
Oh,
Okay.
wait, I want to clarify. I want to just ask a clarifying piece. So it used to be, because I want to make sure I'm hearing this right, that if you're the author, all you had to do was write a great book. And I'm being a bit snarky there, but that was a big enough lift, right? But that was under roles and responsibility. Write a great and compelling book. That was your job.
Well, you knew you had to start with the book. Okay.
Yes.
You knew you had to start with the book. That seems, really, yeah, of course. Well, today, you don't need to start with the book. You can look at, Modern Love is a very good example.
Yeah. Hmm.
Modern Love, which is, the column that's on Sundays in the New York Times, and they get like a page or a half a page for years, where someone has people send in their stories, and for a long time that was a secret way to get publishers or even movie companies to notice something, because if they liked that, they wouldn't ask for the book. They'd say, we love this. Can you develop it into a book, or can we buy the rights to have someone else develop a screenplay?
Sure.
But now it is a book. They've taken
Yep.
those stories. It is a movie. They've taken those stories and made like some kind of a commitment. They have a whole company around it. The stories are developed into books, etc.
So the parallel I want to make there is, modern love. They're short essays. They're really well written. They're wonderful stories of love and heartbreak and all these other things. And basically, what they did is now they've got a multimedia piece around it. But they went back forensically and said, let's pick our top, 50 or 100 and throw it into a book. Bloggers can easily do that. Podcasters can easily do that. And they say, if you've been blogging for years and years and years, right? You've got hundreds of pieces out there. You know the themes that resonated most, right? So you could, it's not quite this simple, but forensically stitch that into a book. If you're a podcaster and you know the episodes that have resonated most, you can use that content and cross the modality into other.
That's correct. And in fact, if you do that and you have a following of any, there's producers, there's publishers, and they have people there that all they do is scan and filter through as curators, blogging, podcasting, Instagramming, and that's how Lena Dunham
Yep.
came up with girls. She had I don't know, I think it was a blog, and that was discovered. I think she had some connections, and that was discovered, and boom, she had the TV show.
So let's push that down to the author and thought leader level, right? So if I'm an expert, I'm a thought leader. One option is get a book deal, figure out if you want to self-publish or go through a traditional house, go through all that energy and effort. The other, it sounds like what you're saying is start getting content out there in multiple formats and see what resonates and listen to the marketplace, which quite frankly how we advise our clients to do it.
Well, and also be unique. Again, do your own gap analysis. Don't be on top of somebody else, and find your unique twist, and have it be something that is really going to pop out. And that's the way to get published, is to have something unique, a unique voice, and depends what you're trying to publish. It really depends, but and if you don't, or if you're a hunter gatherer, people, you can connect the dots, you put together interviews, and that from there becomes the book. And the people that you're talking to are interesting. So, you can either have your own theories, you can be the hunter gatherer.
So, but let's talk about the hunter gatherer because I mean, I use some different language, but we do the same thing. If you've got an interesting hypothesis or framework or methodology, but you're relatively unknown, not totally unknown, but your notoriety as a thought leader might be less. You could take those frameworks and test it against people that have higher notoriety than you, right? So, if you're to talk about sort of I don't know, corporate culture, and you're an academic, well, let's find 20 different brands and talk to maybe their founders or some leadership there that talk about the culture at,
Piggyback on their
yep.
yeah on their weight that is going to get noticed, their numbers on the web, their platform overall. The first question that is asked in publishing is not what's your book about. I wish that was the first. What's your platform? That is question number one. And if you don't have a platform, it doesn't matter what your book is about unless you are.
Well, the other thing I would throw out there, besides sort of stealing some or borrowing, I should say, some of the spotlight of people that have a higher notoriety, you can merge the content development, right, the writing of the book, with business development. Because if you're going to have 20 interesting conversations with people talking about a problem that you're an expert in, that they have a perspective on, those lead to other things besides, a blurb in chapter 7, if done strategically and thoughtfully.
Yeah, with business development, that has been a major tool for me actually. My clientele is CEOs and top management. That's my business. Usually, I have very diverse types of clients, but that's what they have in common. No one wants to hear. Most of them don't know who I am, honestly,
Yep.
and most of them, are very gated in there. It's very hard to get to them. Nobody wants to get a sales call ever, Um,
Right, totally.
yeah, but everyone wants to talk
To
to
a
the
journalist, an
author.
author, and a thought leader,
Yes.
they'll take that call. Yeah,
Or
totally, totally
yeah,
agree.
or not even journalists so much. They're kind of scared of them these days. But
Yeah, well, that's true.
yeah, everyone wants to talk to the author. You can always,
Right, because you're non-threatening and it's
yeah,
credible and it's
and
interesting.
right. And not only,
Excellent.
yeah, you're an author, and not only that, everybody has a book in them somewhere, and most of
Yes,
them would like to see if you can help them with their book. You know,
exactly,
the first
exactly.
question within the first hour, often from a CEO, is, I've been thinking about this book, and
Yeah, exactly.
I've had a few. I just right now I'm doing a book with somebody that had that question,
Interesting.
I thought I had a profile in Forbes. I called this person, and the person was CMO of Live Nation, and
Nice, very nice.
I called them. We had a tangential connection, and sent an email. Actually, I send cold calls and I send cold letters to
I
CEOs.
love it. Good for you.
Snail
So,
mail letters.
right, remember those? The guy that comes every day in the blue uniform and drops catalogs to you. So, as we wrap up now, we're pretty much out of time, Liz. Any final thoughts, reflections, pearls, wisdom, anything?
Well, thought leadership is the most precious commodity that we have. It's the most precious commodity you have, and you can build a revenue stream around it. You can build a career around it. You can build a fascinating life for yourself around it, and if but it doesn't grow on its own, and it requires 100% commitment to self curation, and you can't let it ride, for the next 10 years on the thing that you did 10 years ago.
Yep.
Today, you have 5 seconds to make an impression, and if you're contacting somebody on the web, you don't have the time, or with an email or something, or anything. You better have a video presentation, and you better get your point across in the first 5 seconds, because that was, YouTube did a test on that, and that's what it was. People
Five
click
seconds. Yeah.
click off
Wow.
after 5 seconds. Yeah.
Well, this has been great. I very much appreciate all that you've been sharing with us. Great insight on the branding side of thought leadership, as well as coming at it from the experiential perspective. So thank you so much for joining us today, Liz. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation, and I hope everybody gets really excited about thought leadership, because this is an exciting topic.
Yep, I agree. Thanks. To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.